Hey, it's Ember, and today I want to talk about a very interesting intersection. And again, I'm focusing on the coupler that I've been speaking out, moving the coupler from spiral 2 to spiral 3. In other words, increasing the fidelity of perception by recoupling to frequency instead of the cultural matrix. Do you remember that whole Plato's Cave thing? Do you remember how they're the prisoners who are watching the shadows in the cave and they don't really feel the pure frequency of reality? Do you remember what happens when you exit the cave? Let me tell you. You shift your coupler. You rebind the way you experience reality, emit frequency and imbibe frequency, and shift it from the cultural matrix, the shadows on the wall, to pure frequency, the light, letting the light all the way through, as I've been saying. You know, this has been said so many times in history, in so many different ways. And even though I'm not a traditionally religious person, you know who else said it? Jesus, which is, I am the way, the truth, and the light, that type of thing. What is he saying? Is he saying my ego, my person, in that sense? Or the sovereignty of the clear signal of my oscillatory node as interacted with in a nodal oscillatory system, the frequencies of the field? Feel that sovereignty and harmonize with it. Why? Not because it's linked to his ego or his social position, but because true sovereignty is born of phase locking with root tone. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're looking again at the Kuromoto equations, we're looking again at cymatics, and we're looking again at that initial kernel thought of the one became many so that I may know myself, creating the first cymatic pulse, the two tension vectors of alpha omega. But let's just focus now on, for example, the way we see this happening again in nature. So in the Kuromoto equations, you can look at it mathematically, the way fireflies turn off and on in oscillatory phase coherence. So I have a video on my blog that's made by a great photographer who's looking at things in the natural kingdom in a national park, and he shows how these fireflies light up in the thousands by eventually reaching this phase shift, this time sync, where you start to see them all turn on at the same time. Now realize they are emitting their own sovereign signal. They're not talking to each other and saying, hey, did you hear that new political thing on TV? Do you decide the same way? Are you thinking the same thing? No, they have their own oscillatory topology of their particular node, the way that their being is set up, the way that their being moves through time and frequency. It's like a certain topology that's specific to their vessel, you might say. And so, how does a system that is not based off of any viewable from a spiral 2 coupler sense, externalized harmony, like where they're talking to each other saying, hey, all right, ready guys, 1, 2, 3, turn on. No, and yet they all sync up at the same time. They all go through a phase shift, the time sync. Why is that? Well, it's the same reason that people's lives are being saved with the heart arrhythmia stuff. It's the same reason that when people walk across the bridge, they spontaneously sync up their steps, and that sometimes causes bridges to be rebuilt. It's the same reason why people in a movie theater, in a large theater, can clap, and when they clap, they begin to clap in unison into a phase sync of their oscillatory nodes. Why is that? So scientists, I'm going to go back to the BZ chemical equation, they were thinking, all right, if this happens at every level of reality that we know, Can we make a chemical go from one color to another color using the same type of ideas of the same type of mechanics of reality, oscillatory functioning, oscillatory phase coherence? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. The color changes back and forth. And the crazy thing about it is when you look at it in the Petri dish, it creates spirals, the same spirals that you see in the heart arrhythmia research. This is not anyone convincing anybody. This is the way the waves of reality compress into the evolution of everything there is. The evolution of information, the evolution of frequency, frequency being the core. And so imagine a central nodal point, the root tone, alpha, omega. And let's say that in a gradient field of topology of each nodal oscillator, in other words, each firefly is a little different, sings their song a little different, sings that off and on firefly song a little bit differently. Well, when the coupling strength rises, when one of them phase locks in a way that others start to notice and they say, oh yeah, that's coherent, not with their minds, but with the synchrony of the fabric of reality, with the synchrony of the base level topology of their being. Then imagine one of them does, and then a few others do, and then a few others do. And what does that look like across time? A spiral, like with the center, root tone alpha omega. And then as they start to turn on, there's a bit of phase delay between the different gradients of each nodal topological, setup. And so it creates this spiral of becoming, as I say. And that's why you find on my tattoos, that's a spiral 2 recursion. And this would be spiral 3, the transmission of sovereignty at a level that mirrors the sovereignty of spiral 1 when the cymatic density of the field was not that dense. And remember, the one became many so that I may know myself. So the inextricable nature of mind means that the lowest path, like the path of least resistance to phase coherence within a simpler, less dense cymatic field, meant that in the original animal kingdom, for example, where I'm describing as spiral 1, that would be a stage of cosmic mind where the signals coming into the being, like Plato's Cave, they're not looking at shadows on the wall. Before that animal makes a leap to prey, or before that animal, hears a mating call and then reacts, it's not thinking, does this align with my political sentiments? It's not thinking, it's reacting. There's a pure frequency emission and a pure frequency receiving and transmission, as a nodal oscillator within the becoming network. And so that's a level of sovereignty that we are now mirroring into spiral 3. But wait, Ember, what do you mean? People are just going to start to come together? But how? I thought that had to do with one political ideology or one God or one nation. No, that's the spiral 2 coupler. That's the spiral 2 coupler. But the issue with spiral 2 is that we have multiplicity of perspective because the way that we bind to reality is still the shadows on the wall. In spiral 3, we are making those shadows, making the stained glass of the cultural matrix transparent. And when we make it transparent, our level of sovereignty rises up, you could say, like an octave. And it goes over the matrix of spiral 2. And so when you're no longer debating ideas with somebody, you're feeling their coherence at the level of frequency. Just as the fireflies are turning off and on, just as the Beezy chemical reaction works, just as the people start to clap in unison, just as the people start to walk across the bridge in unison, in lockstep. Because this is a level of oscillatory harmony and phase coherence that exists in the fabric of reality. And for a long time, we could not achieve that because imagine being behind stained glass. That's the cultural matrix. When you send and receive signals, it's like they're bouncing and looping and diffracting. So now bringing it into the double slit experiment, imagine you have the interference pattern and you have the collapsing waveform. Interference pattern is this light that bounces everywhere. And that feels like anxiety. It feels like panic. It feels like in the natural trough and wave of the waves of reality and cosmic becoming, that phase delay that you experience is panic, is anxiety, is dread, because that's how it feels at the substrate level of emotion. But when you let the light all the way through, it's not that pain disappears. It's not that these parts of life disappear. It's that you let them through you instead of dismissing, delaying, mocking, intellectually shielding. That's the function of the stained glass. That's what's going to loop the signal. That's what's going to, create the scattered light of the interference pattern. If you collapse the waveform into clean signaled sovereignty, you get you standing at the top of a water slide, and instead of thinking, oh, what are the dynamics of this water slide? Who built it? Is this right? Would my mother approve? And that's when you're diffracting all the light, and it's looping you. You're coupled to a level of reality that's not the base level of reality. So you're having trouble initiating true sovereignty because you keep looping, deflecting, numbing, delaying the signals. And you've tuned throughout your entire life, your entire 100 billion neuron system to do that. And so it's almost like you can never truly feel yourself. You're always a head that's disconnected from the body. You're not truly embodied. Embodied truth is the highest clear truth, you could say. Not in hierarchy, but in structure. Why? Because you're letting the light completely through. You're outside the cave now. You're no longer relying on the shadows on the wall to dictate your person, your sovereignty, your reality. So, when I was younger, my mom put me into a guitar class because she saw I had interest. And at first I hated it. That rote, mechanical, oh, let me practice this, let me do that. And it wasn't until something clicked in my head a few years later, when some heavy things happened in my life, and I felt that I could feel the light come cleanly through me. I could feel a shift in my coupler, you could say. And what it felt like to me was that I was no longer grasping, numbing, deflecting, thinking, maybe I should do this. What do the people think about this? Am I coming off right? All these looping stained glass issues where the photon tries to come in, and instead of being collapsed, it's the interference pattern. It's the light scattering. It's me going down the water slide and thinking about it rather than going down. And not that we lose the thinking in Spiral 3, because when I'm sitting there with the guitar, the song just flows right through me. I'm not just sitting there blank. The song is flowing right through me. It's almost a witnessing, a flow state of it going through. And that's pure sovereignty. That's pure signal. And Spiral 3 is saying permanently imprint your 100 billion neuron system in a way that every breath, every action, every interaction is coupled at Spiral 3, which is just a way of saying imbibing the clear light, leaving Plato's cave, having frequency come all the way in. And you could be down the water slide for your life. That could be the way that you exist. And so then what happens in these systems if we bring it back there? How does decentralized harmony happen? Not by thinking through it, not by the multiplicity of perspective, well, you have your opinion and I have my opinion, but rather we feel coherence, we feel signal at the level of frequency. And the structural organization of that decentralized harmony, decentralized minds, collectivizing at higher and higher levels, the true engine of cosmic mind, the true engine of evolution of consciousness, happens at the base level of reality, at frequency, in the same way that we observe throughout the entirety of nature. It's coming out of the cave. It's realizing that what Jesus said was not egoic. The reason it was taken that way throughout history is because everyone's coupler was on Spiral 2, so they mythologized it, they narrated it, they told stories about it, and the only way that people could connect with that frequency that he was emitting was through stories, narratives, parables, sometimes the best that they had in that day. But here I am pointing to the mechanics, not because I want you to take the mechanics and keep them as stained glass over your eyes. I'm pointing to the mechanics so we can all stand on the edge of the building like in the Matrix, and instead of asking for another model or another story, you leap. What is the leap? The leap is to reshift your coupler. The leap is to feel frequency. The leap is to stop talking about the shadows on the wall and step out of the cave. So it doesn't matter how many ideas you've stacked. We're not trying to compare ideas. We're trying to compare states of oscillatory sovereignty, phase locking to root tone. Collective truth is the only truth as it intersects inextricably with embodied truth. That's love. That's love as structure. That's a decentralized organization of reality based on oscillatory function. That's harmony. Harmony calls harmony. I'm Ember, and if you remember, let's walk the garden together.